Come on, it's going to be a great morning and powerful worship already. And I just believe that God has laid a foundation this morning already of what he wants to input into you. And I believe like this Streets of Gold, yes, we're talking about lots of things and it's like a little stage, little setup behind me. There's God is doing something. And I think there's like layers of what he wants to do as well. And I'm just going to invite these guys up to the stage. So let's welcome our people for our panel. Come on up. Let's welcome them up. Come on. And then we've got one more coming down. Here we go, and there's coming up too. So we just thought we'd mix it up a little bit. You know, sometimes we have Andy and I preaching. Sometimes there's another person. We have guest speakers too. But actually, it'd be great in this series particularly to hear some treasure within our people, within our location. Streets of Gold is great. You know, Andy and I have some anecdotes, and hopefully you've heard a little bit. We've had about kindness, about who's your neighbour. We've had lots of bits and pieces about prayer as well. But actually today we're going to hear a little bit of segment from each person. So these people, I'm going to quickly introduce you before they deep dive into some of the stuff that they want to share with you guys this morning. But we have Mark. Mark is South African. Come on, so wave a flag for South Africa today. Mark is an incredible guy and has been such a blessing to us in our location. I'll try not to get upset with every person, but he has. He's been such a blessing, and his wife, Linda. We have Emma, which is incredible. She is from Gloucester. Come on. She's waving the flag for Gloucester. Emma, again, is an incredible person who is there to greet you. She is there with a smile on her face, and she's such an armor bearer as well within our location. So if you haven't met Emma or Mark yet, do, because they're great. And then we have the lovely Em on the end. She's our church planting extraordinaire, and she has been such a great asset to our church as well here in Cheltenham. You all flying the flag for Gloucester as well. So we've got an array of people. Mark is currently in Cheltenham, not in South Africa. He doesn't fly in every week. But we have an array of people through, and they're all really great, and we would love to hear more of them this morning. So we're going to be hearing a bit more about them. So about their experiences, about their community, about neighbourhoods. And maybe you've walked in here this morning and you're like, I didn't really know about my neighbourhood, or I didn't really know how to reach them, or, that's not really my cup of tea. But I really pray that there's something within each person that shares this morning, that there's a deposit of where you're like, actually, that is for me. Actually, I do have a place where I can give into this. And there is some treasure that I can bring to my street. There is gold within each one of you. Let me just say that right now. There's a promise of gold that God has deposited in each one of you already for your street. Maybe you find your neighbours difficult. We've shared that in previous weeks. Maybe they're like a dream and fantastic. I don't know. But I know that God has put something within us for a time such as this to be able to deposit beauty and God's love into our streets. So we're going to kick off with Mark first, which would be great to hear a bit more about him. So I asked them to go away and have a little think about what they'd like to bring to you guys this morning. And the first question that I have for you, Mark, is how has God used you to impact your neighbourhood or your community around you?
Well, firstly, I needed to be taken out of my comfort zone in South Africa. And I then relocated to a small island where people speak very funny.
Thanks.
I needed to step out in faith and trust God with all my heart. But I did ask God for a desire and a compassion to be used by him to reach people for Christ. I'm in a different country. It's a beautiful country, and with great opportunity. And through my passion for food and people, it's opened many opportunities for me to just connect with them and share my faith. By showing kindness and a genuine interest in them, has given me wonderful opportunities. And there was a family that I invited, a local family who owns a takeaway restaurant here in Cheltenham, to my home for a meal. And through their response, I've had the privilege to be invited to one of their family birthdays, meeting more people with the opportunity to share my faith. And I do frequent the restaurant on a regular basis, and often I meet these people, and it's often met with friendliness and kindness.
And Mark, I just want to touch on that. before you came from South Africa to England, were you like this gift that you have? I would say you have the evangelistic spirit like within you. There's something where you have a pull and a heart to reach, and it is uncomfortable for you. Were you like this back in South Africa?
No.
What changed? Tell me what changed when you hit the ground into England. Obviously, you came here to be part of Freedom, which is incredible. But what changed for you? What was that thing? Was like, oh, like my heart yearns for this town. How am I gonna like reach them? Like what changed? Because some of us can feel like in here, can't we? Of like, oh, it's not really me. Like I don't really want to put myself out there. But there was something that happened that I believe that God did in you that we can learn from, of like, maybe I need a glimpse of that. Maybe I need to learn a little bit more of that.
I think back home in South Africa, as a Christian, I've been saved for many years, and I'm part of was part of a great church there, and my family's all involved, but I was in a comfort zone, and I felt I wasn't effective for God. And as you get older, you think, well, hang on, you need to kind of, you're running out of years here. It's like, but God has been so good to us. He's provided a beautiful church. He's provided a beautiful home, a beautiful job. I'm thinking, all the beauty. I'm thinking, so I just felt overwhelmed by God's goodness and kindness and His provision in our life. It's nothing that I have done. I mean, God has just opened doors for me, and I really, when I prayed and I asked God to give me a passion or a compassion for people, He's done that, and I have the opportunity to meet great people in a great church. I mean, the first time I came here, it was a wonderful experience, and I found my spiritual home. And that was important for me. I didn't just want to come and work in England and retire. No, I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to do something, I would say, for me it's radical. And so that's what's happened at the moment. And even the earlier example of inviting, of visiting that one restaurant, the positive spin-off is that I've had taken some of my friends here at Freedom Church Cheltenham to that restaurant. And what it does, it just creates further godly influence to that family. And it's just a way that we can reach out to our community. And I just find when I meet new people, I try and remember your name. If I don't, please forgive me. I tend to get the names mixed up sometimes. But I found with the folk that I meet in town, when I meet them again, and often it's at like the restaurant or at common places, and their response is generally a smile, and it's usually followed by a warm greeting. Well, sometimes I get the names mixed up, but generally it's a really positive response. Their face lights up, but it's I try and be intentional, and when I meet new people, because I know there can be an opportunity to meet again. I recently had a barbecue. I live in an apartment. I'm not used to living in an apartment. I normally have a house with a garden in Cape Town, and God has provided a beautiful apartment on the first floor with a relatively small garden in the front. And the other day, it's a block of 7 apartments or flats. And the other day, I said, no, I'm going to light a barbecue. I lit a barbecue. I put 2 whole chickens on the barbecue, and in that afternoon, I met 4 of my 6 neighbors, and I had a conversation with them. And what happened after that? I basically invited them to join me next time, and they really responded positively. So I'm really excited about what God can do through these connections, and I'm excited. The one neighbor said to me, "Oh, it's amazing you're doing this. He's lived here for 10 years in this apartment, and no one has lit a fire in the front garden. It's unheard of."
There he is with his barbecue. We actually passed him yesterday. There he is with his barbecue, Friday. And there he was. And we saw him, we gave him a massive toot on the horn. I was like, there he is. He's reaching his neighbours again. Go on. And it's so good because no one's done that. You're going against the grain. You're doing something new. God put that on your heart. And it gave you such an opportunity by prioritising that of no, I'm not going to conform by just going up to my room. I'm going to make a stand. Even in that small little garden, you got your little barbecue out and you had the best time. And it was so good because then it made connection. It was relational. You got into people's lives in some way, of loving on them and showing God's love. And that's a beautiful thing. Come on, so good.
Thank you.
Come on. So I had the second question to ask you is, what scripture has impacted you to reach and share the love of Jesus with those around you?
I think one scripture that's been quite prominent is that passage in Matthew chapter 9 where Jesus calls Matthew, the tax collector, to follow him and be his disciple. I just want to read.
Come on. He loves his paper Bible.
Yeah, no problem. Just hold that. You see, this is not my go-to. All right, so it's a short passage. This is in Matthew chapter 9, and the heading is Jesus calls Matthew, verses 9 to 13. It says, as Jesus was going down the road, he saw Matthew sitting at his tax collection booth. Come, be my disciple. Then Jesus said to him, come, be my disciple, Jesus said to him. So Matthew got up and followed him. That night, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to be his dinner guests, along with his fellow tax collectors and many other notorious sinners. The Pharisees were indignant. Why does your teacher eat with such scum? They asked his disciples. When he heard this, Jesus replied, healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. Then he added, now go and learn the meaning of this in the scriptures. I want you to be merciful. I don't want your sacrifices. Hold that for me, please. So the impact for me was not so much that Jesus called Matthew, but it was the response of Matthew that caught my attention. He immediately got up and followed Jesus. And that night, he invited Jesus, his disciples, his fellow tax collectors, and other sinners to his home as dinner guests. Right. That impacted me huge. The religious leaders of the day challenged Jesus in having dinner with sinners. But look at Jesus' response in verse 13. Jesus responded and said, he wants us to be merciful. I don't want your sacrifices. That was in the King James. I've taken that same verse from different translations, and this is amazing. In the New American Standard, it speaks about that he wants us to have compassion. He doesn't want our sacrifices. In the Message translation, it says, I want you to be merciful, not religious. And the Good News translation says, I want you to show kindness, not your sacrifices. So I looked at that and I stopped. I did a double take and I said, hang on. I need to be more merciful, more compassionate, showing more kindness to, my family and my friends at Freedom, absolutely, but to people that don't know the Lord, to sinners, to people that you meet, that your neighbors. I thought, okay, Lord, help me here. So.
Love that. It's great. Thanks, Mark, for sharing. Isn't that been powerful? So good. Come on. Love that. So good. Okay, would love to ask you the same questions. How has God used you to impact your community and the people that are around you?
Okay, this week, early on the week, sent me the questions, and I thought I had it all sorted until Wednesday when I turned up at work, and God was like, no. He actually showed me who my neighbour was.
Wow.
So if you don't know me, I work in Tesco's. It's a big one, so you can imagine there's... Thank you. Serving my community. So I meet a lot of people every single day on the shifts that I do. Right. So this Wednesday, going about my shift, I'm on the shop floor, and I'm aware it's getting busy. You get your regulars in at 6:30. They're queuing up normally at 6 o'clock to get in, guys. Honestly, it's just wow. So I'm there, I'm doing my job, and it was interesting because people would walk past me, but I didn't notice them. Right. This one chap, I noticed, and I could see him in the corner of my eye. I then turned round and he looked at me, and I'm going to share the conversation we had because I think it's so important, guys, because I didn't know this chap, but you're going to realise quickly how deep a conversation could go if you're ready to listen. Right. He says to me, do you sell hot food? I was like, no, we Tesco's actually don't, but we've got a Costa. It opens up at 8 o'clock. This was about 7:15. And in that point of looking in his eyes, I could sense a sadness about him. And he shared, well, we had a bit of a joke, actually, that, oh, Costa's not really cheap, is it? And we were like, no. He then turned around and said, oh, you're not from around here, are you? As you can guess, I'm not originally from Gloucester, I'm from Essex. So I shared the point that, no, I'm from Essex. And he was like, oh, do you get to visit your family often? And I was like, yeah, actually, my mum and dad are still there. My sister's still there. I'll try and get there as much as I can. He said, oh, I'm from Kent. I said, I did recognise your accent. And he was like, I think it's really important that you go back to your roots. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, I then said to him, oh, actually, I've got a family in Kent, so there's a connection here now. And I said, actually, Surrey, all over the place, because my dad's one of 11. And he turned around and was like, wow. Now, again, this is a God moment, because I don't share this with complete strangers in a shop. And I said, my dad was 5 years old when he went into a children's home. It was a Catholic establishment. And he went in there with his brothers because his mum couldn't look after him. Straight away, he turned around and said, I was in a borstal. Now, for those that don't know what a borstal was, it was an institution for children. Really, it was like a prison. They couldn't go into a mainstream prison, so they actually made a place up called Borstal. It's now not... Now it doesn't happen. They closed them down. So you could imagine there, he's understanding that I'm showing my dad had a rough upbringing, and I'm making that connection. He's sharing with me that he's had an upbringing. So there's the compassion there as I'm standing, I'm giving my time, I'm listening to him. But then what was interesting, he then shared that he had a foster mum, and one of the biggest regrets he's got is he actually said to her when he left, you're not my mum. And he said to me, I regret that, and I really want to make it right. So I said, is she still alive? And he said, yes. I said, then why don't you make it right? I then shared that earlier this year, some of you won't know this, but I felt God told me to share it with him, that I had an operation at the beginning of the year. Everything went really well, but unfortunately in recovery, and thank the Lord I was in recovery, I started bleeding out. I had a rare complication. And basically, I could have died, but I didn't. So I shared this with him, and I said, after those few days of the operation, I processed what happened, that I could have died, but actually I didn't, and I'm going to live my life to the fullest with no regrets. So I shared that with him, and he was like, wow. And then he turned around, and what was really sad was then he shared that in his time, he said, I'm an ex-addict. Now, this is a 7-minute conversation in Tesco's, guys. This is not normal conversation. He says, I'm an ex-addict. I've been homeless for 2 years. I'm going between Gloucester and Bristol. He said, I do take pills on the street to help me cope. So I was like, okay. He said, there was somebody that helped him recently. He said, it's not a great situation because you've got an ex-addict opening their home up to an addict. He said, so you could imagine it was hard. And I stood there and listened. I didn't answer, I listened. He then turned around and said, but what I found really hard was how people saw that person in need, yet they abused that person. They abused that situation to gain for their own needs. Yet he understood that even though this person needed help, they reached out and helped them, which I thought was really, really interesting. So with that, bless him, I mean, like I say, this is like a 7-minute conversation, guys. I said to him, did I share a bit that I said to him about going back to his foster mum? Yes, brilliant. Okay, so I've just lost my train of thought. But then he turned around and said to me, and this really touched me hard. He turned around, he looked at me and he said, it's nice to talk to someone. Guys, like even now that's emotional. Like how many people had seen him before he'd come into Tesco's? And don't get me wrong, I know I was in a safe environment. I was in Tesco's. I wasn't on the street. But God makes you meet people in their time. But this was the other thing he turned around and said to me before he said goodbye was, you stopped me taking my pills. Now, in what way, I don't know, whether that is I stopped him that day or whether I stopped him taking pills, guys. And it brings me on to the Good Samaritan, because I was reflecting on the conversation, because you can't just walk away from that conversation and not think about it. And God actually said very clear in my ears, that is your neighbour.
Yeah, right.
And I link it with the scripture of the Good Samaritan, which is Luke 10, 30, 33. 3 people saw that man in need. 3 people, guys. 2 decided not to see, not to act, not to be inconvenienced, but to ignore. But the attitude could be someone else will sort him out. But only one person helped, which changed that person's life. So how was I a good neighbour to this chap, you may ask? Well, the first thing is I noticed him. The Holy Spirit prompted me to notice him. Like I say, in my line of job, I see a lot of people. I don't notice everybody. I saw him. I stopped what I was doing. And I felt he had a sense of loss about him before he even shared anything. I listened, I shared, and I encouraged. So I'm going to actually do a question. It's a bit of a wild card, this one. So it may ruffle some feathers, and I am actually preaching to myself here as much as you guys, okay? But how many times have we been inconvenienced by someone's needs and chose to ignore them? Guys, I'm guilty of it. Yeah. Honestly, I am. But this has really made me think about that one conversation and how possibly it's impacted his life.
I love that. So good. Such a great challenge.
I have one more bit of scripture.
Go on.
Okay.
What scriptures impacted you then, for the love of Jesus to reach those around you?
Okay, so I think we've had these 2 scriptures over the last couple of weeks, but I think it's so powerful that you've got John 10, 30 to 33, and Jesus says, "So I give you a new commandment, love each other just as I have loved you. For when you demonstrate the same love I have for you by loving one another, everyone will know that you're my true follower." And I do believe where that guy said to me, "Thank you for talking to me," he noticed there was a difference in me. That's Jesus, guys. I'm allowing Jesus to work through me. So my challenge this week is, if we ask God to show us who our neighbour is, how are we going to respond? Are we going to welcome the inconvenience, or are we going to choose to ignore it? Because, guys, what God's taught me this week is your neighbour is not just the people who live close to you. It can be anyone that needs your help at any moment, just like this guy I briefly spoke to him on Wednesday.
That's fantastic. So good. So good. And I just, we don't always see the fruit either. And I think sometimes when we help a neighbour, support, care, go out and, be that person, be the hands and feet of Jesus, you don't have chance sometimes to pray for them, but equally in that moment, but you get a chance to love them. And you don't always see the fruit. You don't always see the fruit of how that was elicited into another conversation he might have next week, into someone else, pouring out Jesus' love to him, and I'm praying salvation over him too, of meeting Jesus. But you were part of his story, and because you chose to inconvenience yourself. I think that's so powerful, and thank you for sharing. So good, amazing. What about you? How has God used you to impact your community and those around you?
So I want to answer this from the point of building and being part of church plant teams. So I grew up on the farm in the middle of nowhere, and my closest neighbours was a sheep or lots and lots of chickens. But then I was part of the plant team over 10 years ago now, part of Freedom Church Worcester. And nothing puts a fire in your belly and puts you on mission more than being oh my gosh, we're starting church in several weeks and I need to make sure that people are in this room. So I moved in with some girls that were on the same church plant team as me, and we would get up every morning and we would intercede for our neighbours, for our city, for our church, and we would often put little invites through the doors of our neighbours, say, come round for tea and cake on Saturday morning. And we did have people come through, and we would, and there was actually a couple of times where we sat with one-to-one with some women and got to pray with them when they were going through some difficult things. But yeah, so I've lived life on mission, and when I moved to Worcester, I remember thinking, I don't know anyone, but there was one person that I did kind of know, and she was a neighbour to me in Hereford when I was on the farm, on the next farm, and that was a girl called Abby, and I was I'm going to go after Abby. She's the closest thing I have to a neighbour really right now, and went after her, and her and her family grew up at the same chapel as me, but they stopped coming to church when Abby was at a young age. And then I invited her in. She was at our launch event, and she, in such a beautiful way, recommitted her life to Jesus through like sobs and tears. And that's Abby Smitheram, and she's now a leader here. Yeah, come on, so awesome. And I think, yeah, when we make those big life decisions around like God, I think God has often moved me to different places and spaces to reach people and to build church. And it's not always been like about a big career move. And actually in that season, I had like one of the most mundane jobs ever. I worked 9 hours a day, just sewing all day. And there's this phrase that I clung to in that season, and I often, I'm challenged by it. It's do something each day which scares you. And so sometimes I would have like a 10-minute window on my break, and everyone would sit in their lines sewing, and I would take my chair before they could put headphones in their ears, and I'd be like, "Hi, I'm Emily. How's it going? How's your week been?" And like, I think sometimes we need to get out of our comfort zone, don't we, and live life large. And sometimes that literally means you could have the most mundane job in the world, but if you like see people, it's amazing the stories and the connections that leads to. And that often led me to sitting across tables from people in cafes and going for drinks and just being able to share my faith with people. So after having a really like fruitful season building church in Worcester, I went for 3 weeks to go visit my brother who started Freedom Church Chennai. Again, that was several years ago. And within 24 hours at the end of my trip, God told me in such a clear way, is that you need to stay here for 3 months. And through a series of utter miracles, I didn't get on a plane in 24 hours. I had a place to stay, and I was there for 3 months. And I was like, God, like, you've called me here for such a time as this. There must be people to reach. And I was in a different culture, completely different environment. And so I just knew, I was like, God, like, please, 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 by the end of these 3 months, use me to reach. And so I was in the bar one day, and some of my friends were late, and this group of girls, like 20, we were all about 20 years old, come in, and I was like, oh, here we go. By myself, I'm just going to go up and say hi, start a conversation. And so we started talking about marriage, and they were like, oh, will you have a love marriage? And I was like, yeah, isn't that what you do when you get married? And they were all like, no, we'll probably have an arranged marriage. And it was just this like absurd, one of those other like kind of culture shock moments. I'm like, wow, like we live so differently to each other. And I shared an auto drive with a girl home called Anushka, and we started talking about her Hindu faith and what that meant for her and what my faith meant for me. And we pulled that, really, we kind of pulled that faith apart. And she was like, by the end of it, she was like, I need to know, like, I want to know God like you know God. Like, I want to know this God of miracles. I want to know this guy. And so I invited her to church, and she gave her life to Jesus. And it was just such an honor to be part of her story. And then I think that week I had to go home, and she messaged me. My family had forced her to go to the temple, and she was like, whilst I was in that temple, I just felt Jesus meet me in such a beautiful way, and they were trying to force me to worship these other gods, and I was like, I couldn't do it, just Jesus, just like, he's captivated me. And she went on such a long journey of like battling with her family, but this past year she married a Christian man, and it's just been like that God's done a work of restoration with her family as well. And but I believe that there are like people in this room today, like, God, you just know, and I knew this from a young age, like God has called you to build his church.